The briefcase was still on the table when Carol Linden walked out of the meeting and never came home. On the evening of October 9, 1974, in the farming community of Harlan, Iowa, population 5,357, autumn had settled in the way it does only in the Midwest, the kind of cold that smells like cut corn and wood smoke, that turns the sky the color of a bruise by 5:30. At 6:22 p.m., a fellow county employee named Dwight Olkers watched Carol push open the rear door of the Shelby County Municipal Building, step into the parking lot, and raise one hand in a wave without looking back. She was carrying her good coat over one arm. Her other hand held nothing. Her tan Oldsmobile Cutlass was still parked in the second row. What happened in the next 90 minutes would haunt Harlan for the next 50 years. But to understand what was lost on that October evening, you first have to understand who Carol Linden was. Because Carol wasn't a name on a file. She was the kind of person who held a community together without anyone quite noticing how. Harlan, Iowa in 1974 was the kind of town where the school district newsletter was also the social calendar. There were 5,357 people in town, and most of them could name 5,000 of the others. Families had farmed the same land for 3 generations. The post office was where you learned the news. The Lutheran church on 3rd Street was where you processed it. Carol Ann Linden had grown up 7 miles outside of town on her parents' hog operation in Tennant. The kind of childhood that leaves you permanently capable of early mornings and hard work. By 1974, she was 34 years old, a records administrator with Shelby County, and the sort of county employee the whole office depended on without formally acknowledging it. She knew where every document was. She remembered who'd filed what and when. Her supervisor, according to records later reviewed by investigators, described her as the person who made everything work. She was a mother. Her daughter, Marcy, was 9 years old. Her son, Dale, was 6. Their father, Robert Linden, drove a seed corn truck for Pioneer and came home for supper most nights at 6. The family lived in a yellow ranch house on Birch Avenue, with a chain-link fence and a black Labrador retriever named Pepper. Carol brought a thermos of coffee to work every morning. Black, no sugar. She kept it on the corner of her desk and refilled it twice. She brought Dale a fall-themed paper bag every Friday, a Tootsie Roll, a small comic, and whatever he was currently collecting. That October, it was baseball cards. The Shelby County employees later remembered her as someone who laughed easily and argued rarely. Records show she'd received a commendation from the county board the previous spring for reorganizing 15 years of property assessment files that had grown unmanageable. She hadn't asked to be thanked. She just did it because it needed doing. That was who Carol Linden was on the morning of October 9, 1974. When she kissed her children, told Marcy to let Pepper out at 4, and drove her Cutlass to the county building for the last time. The county board meeting ran long. Records from the Shelby County Archives document that it was scheduled to end at 5:30 and didn't break until approximately 6:15. There were 7 people in the meeting room that evening. 4 county commissioners, the county recorder, a local attorney named Gerald Finn, and Carol, who was there to retrieve signed documents and enter the evening's actions into the administrative log. At 6:18 p.m., she completed her log entry. Witnesses later told investigators she gathered her materials, declined an offer to join 3 colleagues for dinner at the Prairie Inn, and said she needed to get home to start supper. At 6:22 p.m., Dwight Olkers saw her cross the parking lot. He remembered her tan coat. He remembered she didn't look back. Her Oldsmobile Cutlass was found at 7:50 p.m. by her husband Robert, who had been waiting since 6:30. The car was locked. Her briefcase was on the passenger seat. Her thermos was in the cup holder. Her purse was on the floor. Carol was not there. Robert called the Harlan Police Department at 7:53 p.m. Officer Gene Halsey arrived at 8:07 p.m. and took an initial report. At 8:45 p.m., a search of the municipal building perimeter began. By 10 o'clock that night, Shelby County Sheriff Raymond Briggs had been called in. By midnight, the search had expanded along the county road corridors east and west of the building. Nothing. One small thing was found the following morning at 7:14 a.m. by a maintenance worker named Art Flaherty. Beneath a blue spruce at the east edge of the parking lot, partially obscured by the lower boughs, he found a single silver earring. A small clip-on oval, tarnished. It matched the description of the earrings Carol had worn to work that day, confirmed by 3 co-workers who had sat across from her in the meeting. The earring was photographed, bagged, and logged into evidence. Then it sat. Sheriff Raymond Briggs ran a thorough early investigation by 1974 standards. A door-to-door canvass of the 6 blocks surrounding the municipal building turned up one witness, a retired schoolteacher named Lorraine Baxter, who reported seeing a dark-colored pickup truck idling near the building's east exit at around 6 o'clock. She couldn't recall the make or the plates. The Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation was called in within the week. The lead investigator assigned was DCI agent Leon Parrish, a 41-year-old former county deputy out of Council Bluffs, who had worked 6 missing persons cases in the previous decade. Parrish would later describe the Carol Linden case as the one he thought about every single day for the rest of his career. Initial attention focused on 2 individuals. The first was Gerald Finn, the attorney who had been present at the meeting and who had a prior acquaintance with Carol from county business dealings. He was interviewed twice, provided a verifiable account of his evening, and was quickly eliminated. The second was a county maintenance employee with a prior criminal record who had been on the building grounds that afternoon. He also provided an alibi, confirmed by 2 witnesses, and was cleared within 10 days. What Parrish later documented in his case notes that would not surface in full for nearly 2 decades, was that there was a third person he wanted to look at. A county board member who had left the meeting separately from the others, and who, when later interviewed, gave an account of his evening that Parrish found inconsistent in one specific detail. The man said he had driven directly home after the meeting and arrived by 6:30. But a neighbor had seen his car parked somewhere else until after 8. Parrish flagged this in his file. He requested a follow-up interview through the sheriff's department. That request was never fulfilled. According to records reviewed by investigators 30 years later, the sheriff's department logged it as a low-priority item, and when Parrish transferred to a different district office the following spring, the thread went cold with him. At home on Birch Avenue, Robert Linden answered the same questions for 18 months. He passed a polygraph in December 1974. He never remarried. He drove the same route past the municipal building every week for 11 years, long after there was any reason to. Marcy Linden, 9 years old when her mother disappeared, started sleeping with the porch light on. She would keep that habit into her 40s. By 1979, 5 years had passed. The Linden case remained technically open on the Shelby County ledger, but open meant almost nothing. There was no active investigation. There were no new leads. The DCI file had grown no new pages since 1975. Robert had moved the children to a smaller house by then. He'd sold the Oldsmobile. The black lab Pepper had died the winter after Carol disappeared, and the children had taken it badly, and Robert had not gotten another dog. The county building on Oak Street was renovated in 1981. The parking lot was repaved. The blue spruce where the earring had been found was taken down in the process. By 1985, Marcy Linden was 20 and studying nursing at Iowa Western Community College. She had a photograph of her mother on her nightstand. Carol in the backyard on a summer afternoon, laughing at something just off camera, a glass of iced tea in her hand, the sunlight in her hair. She looked at it every night. She kept Dale updated every Sunday with a phone call, even after he moved to Omaha, even after he started his own family. By 1990, 16 years had passed. The reward poster that had been printed in October 1974, $100, later raised to $500, had long since disappeared from every diner window in Shelby County. One person who never let go was Leon Parrish. Parrish had retired from the DCI in 1988, but he kept a cardboard box in his garage in Council Bluffs that held his personal notes from the Carol Linden investigation. Not the official file, his own notes. The ones he'd written on yellow legal paper during those long weeks in Harlan in the winter of 1974. He'd gone back and read them a dozen times over the years, and every time he came back to the same inconsistency. The same county board member. The same neighbor. The same gap of 90 minutes that no one had ever properly accounted for. The name in those notes was Warren Delaney. In 1990, Warren Delaney was 58 years old, a retired grain elevator owner and longtime civic fixture. He had served on the Shelby County Cold Case Review Board, a volunteer body established in 1987 to assist investigators on unsolved cases since the board's founding. He was described by colleagues as methodical, detail-oriented, and genuinely committed to seeing old cases resolved. The Shelby County Courier had run a profile on him in 1989. His name appeared in the case file Parrish had helped build in 1974. He had sat in the meeting with Carol Linden the night she disappeared. And for 16 years, he had been one of the people reviewing cold cases, including at least twice the Carol Linden case itself. Nobody had connected these things. Every case on this channel represents weeks of digging through records, verifying facts, and piecing together real lives that deserved better. If you want us to keep uncovering the truth behind stories like this one, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your support is what makes this possible. Now, let's get back to Carol. The break came in 2003. Not from the Cold Case Review Board, not from the Shelby County Sheriff's Department. It came from a genealogy database, and from a retired schoolteacher's nephew in Cedar Rapids who had been building his family tree online. In the summer of that year, the Iowa DCI's Cold Case Unit, a division established in 1999 with 3 full-time investigators, had begun systematically submitting old biological evidence from unsolved cases for forensic testing. The technology had advanced significantly since 1974. Touch DNA, genetic material transferred through skin cells alone, could now be extracted from surfaces that had previously yielded nothing. The silver earring from the Linden case was still in the evidence locker, still in its original evidence bag. In July 2003, DC cold case investigator Sandra Viertel submitted the earring for touch DNA analysis. The process works by lifting microscopic skin cells from the surface of an object and extracting a genetic profile from the DNA inside them. What was found on the clip of that earring was not Carol Linden's DNA. It was someone else's. Someone who had handled it. Sandra Viertel was at her desk on a Thursday morning in September 2003 when the results came back. She read the profile, read it again. Then she uploaded it to a genealogy database, the same kind of website where ordinary people trace their family history, and began cross-referencing. She found a partial match within 6 hours. The match was distant, a third cousin in Cedar Rapids who had registered his DNA while researching his family tree. But it was enough to begin tracing backward. Using public genealogy records and county birth registrations, Viertel and her colleague, investigator Thomas Haas, built a family tree over the following 3 weeks that pointed to a single candidate in Shelby County. The name at the end of that tree was Warren Delaney. Viertel pulled the 1974 case file. She found Leon Parrish's note, the one requesting a follow-up interview that was never completed. She drove to Council Bluffs and sat at Parrish's kitchen table for 3 hours, going through his private notes on yellow legal paper. She called the Shelby County Sheriff's Department the next morning. He was in the building that night, she told Sheriff's Detective Carl Messing. He handled that earring, and for 30 years, no one finished the interview. Warren Delaney was 71 years old in 2003 and still attended the monthly Cold Case Review Board meetings at the county building on Oak Street. His wife had died in 1997. He lived alone in a red brick house on Elm Drive, 3 blocks from the building where Carol Linden had last been seen. Investigators began quietly building the picture. They interviewed Delaney's former neighbors. They pulled financial records. They spoke to a farmhand who had worked for Delaney in the 1970s, a man named Harvey Stoll, then in his late 60s, who told investigators that in the fall of 1974, Delaney had asked him to help move something heavy from the bed of his pickup truck late one night. Stoll had not been asked about this in 1974 because he had not been on anyone's radar. He had never volunteered the information because at the time it had meant nothing to him. What Stoll described he moved that night, heavy, wrapped in a tarpaulin, put into the ground in a low-lying pasture that had since been converted to a row crop field, gave investigators a location. On November 14, 2003, under a court-authorized search warrant, a forensic team conducted a ground-penetrating radar survey of the northeast corner of what had once been Delaney's farmland, 8 miles south of Harlan. The scan returned an anomaly at a depth of approximately 4 feet. Excavation began the following morning. Carol Linden was found on November 15, 2003, 29 years after the meeting. 29 years after the parking lot. 29 years after the earring in the spruce tree. Warren Delaney was taken into custody at 11:14 a.m. that same morning. He was seated at his dining room table when Shelby County deputies arrived. He did not struggle. He did not speak. He looked at the deputy who read him his rights, and then he looked at the wall. News of the arrest moved through Harlan by word of mouth faster than the local radio station could confirm it. A man who had sat on the cold case board. A man who had reviewed the Carol Linden file twice. A man who had been present at the meeting that night, had been flagged in 1974, and had spent 29 years presenting himself as a concerned citizen while Carol's family waited for an answer. The Shelby County Courier ran it the next morning above the fold. Former board member arrested in 1974 disappearance. People left the paper face up on their kitchen tables for days. Marcy Linden, 38 years old and now a registered nurse in Des Moines, received the call from Detective Messing at 8:30 that morning. She called her brother Dale in Omaha 4 minutes later. According to Marcy's own account in a 2004 interview with the Courier, she couldn't say anything for a while. She just held the phone. In April 2004, Warren Delaney pled guilty to second-degree murder in the Shelby County District Court. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison. Under Iowa law, at 71 years old, it was effectively a life sentence. He died in custody in 2011, at age 79, having never publicly explained why. There is a photograph of Carol Linden at a county picnic in the summer of 1973, 1 year before she disappeared. She is standing by a picnic table with a paper plate in one hand and the other arm around a colleague. She's laughing, genuinely laughing, her head tilted back, eyes bright. She is 33 years old, and the sun is in her hair, and she has no idea what October of the following year will bring. Marcy Linden has a copy of that photograph. She has carried it since she was 28 years old. After the sentencing, Marcy spoke briefly to reporters outside the courthouse. She said she had one thing she wanted to say. She said she deserved to come home. The Carol Linden case changed how Shelby County managed conflict of interest on its cold case review board. State guidelines, updated in 2006, now require full disclosure of any personal or professional connection between board members and cases they are asked to review. According to DI documentation, the reforms were explicitly shaped by lessons drawn from this investigation. Leon Parrish was 70 years old when Warren Delaney was arrested. He drove to Harlan from Council Bluffs on November 16, 2003, the day after. He stopped at the municipal building and stood in the parking lot where he'd stood 29 years earlier. He didn't go inside. He kept the yellow legal pad notes. He kept them until he died, in 2009, in a box in his garage in Council Bluffs. His daughter found them and called the Iowa DCI. They are now part of the official case record. What do you do with a truth that arrived 29 years too late? Not too late for justice, but too late for the children who grew up without a mother. Too late for Robert Linden, who drove past that parking lot every week for 11 years. Too late for the black lab Pepper, who waited at the door for months. Justice came, but it came carrying everything it had not been able to prevent. What is it, exactly, that we owe the people who keep asking when the world has already moved on? Marcy Linden left the porch light on for 29 years. What does that kind of faithfulness cost? And what does it mean when the answer finally arrives? And perhaps the hardest question of all, how many other cases have a Warren Delaney somewhere inside them? Someone sitting at the table, reviewing the file, trusted by the system that was supposed to expose them. Justice found Carol Linden after 29 years. Stories like hers are why this channel exists. If you believe truth is worth pursuing no matter how long it takes, subscribe so you don't miss the next case. More solved cold cases are waiting in the description below. Thank you for watching.